Good morning. My name is Jennifer Ryan, and on behalf of the Alliance of Women in Workers' Compensation, I want to welcome you to today's webinar. This webinar continues our industry educational series throughout the month of June. Today is titled Through the Lens, Service Provider Partnerships Models, will last approximately 1 hour and is a pre-recorded webinar being broadcasted today, Thursday, June 16th, 2021. Before we get started, I would like to thank our 2021 corporate sponsors for their support on hosting events such as this. They support us not because they want their logos up on a screen, but they support the cause, which is to affect positive change in the workers' compensation industry through networking, support, mentoring, and collaboration. The Alliance is inclusive of all professionals in workers' compensation, regardless of career stage, with the belief that we can all learn from and support each other. Please be sure to head to the AWWC website for all upcoming virtual events, along with 2 in-person events in October at the National Work Comp Conference and in December at the WCI Conference. Our theme this year is Through the Lens, which will allow us to take different topics each month and focus on specific conversations that will bring value to our audiences. How and when do service providers fit into the claims management model? There are a variety of resources deployed during the claims process and who decides when the time is right. How do employers, payers, and the array of suppliers supporting the claims process work together and deliver services to drive the most successful outcomes possible? Hear from our industry guests as they share and explore the variety of service provider partnerships supporting the workers' compensation claims process. Today, we are joined as Anita Breedlove, AWWC board member, hosts our session today. She is joined by panelists Kathleen Bray, Senior Vice President and Chief Legal Officer at SFM Insurance Company, Magdalena Alvarez-Miller, Supervisor of Work Comp Claims at ICW Group Insurance Companies, Kori Theusch, Director of Operations at S1 Medical, and Annie Davidson, Senior MSP Compliance Counsel and Policy Strategist at ExamWorks Compliance Solutions. Thank you for the time you're spending with us today, and we hope you enjoy this webinar.
Good afternoon. I'm Anita Breedlove, a board member with the Alliance of Women in Workers' Compensation. I'd like to thank you for joining us today for part 3 of our industry education series on the claims management model. Today's session will focus on the service provider role in the claims management process. I'd like to start by having our panelists each introduce themselves. So ladies, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for agreeing to be on our panel. Maggie, would you mind starting with the introductions?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Anita. Hello, everybody. My name is Maggie Alvarez-Miller. I am a supervisor here at ICW Group. My background is in managed care overall. Here at ICW, I'm responsible for managing our internal team of telephonic case managers. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you today.
Thank you. Kathy?
Hi, my name is Kathy Bray. I'm Chief Legal Officer with SFM Mutual Insurance Company, and I have been in this role for 2 years with 28 years previous between private practice and in-house role as a defense attorney, largely in the work comp space as well as an employment space.
Thank you. Kori?
Hi, I'm Kori Theusch. I'm Director of Operations with S1 Medical. I've been here about 4 years on top of my 15, 16-ish career in the managed care space. I am responsible for coordinating all of our products, specifically medical bill review.
Thank you. And Annie?
Hi, my name is Annie Davidson. I am Senior MSP Compliance Counsel and Policy Strategist with ExamWorks Compliance Solutions. I have been practicing for about 10 years, and most of my practice has been in this space. Medicare secondary payer compliance with the Medicare secondary payer statute, Medicaid compliance as well. I was in private practice where I solely focused on workers' compensation and liability insurance defense before I came over here about 5 years ago. So happy to be here.
Perfect. Thank you. So prior to meeting this group of women and kind of talking about our session today, I would have thought that the defense attorney role came at the end of the claims management model. But I've learned from Kathy that that's not necessarily the case. So Kathy, I think that's where we'd like to start and kind of have you talk about the strategic relationship and partnership that you have with your clients and the role of the defense attorney in the claims management process.
Sure. A lot of times I think when you think about defense counsel or defense attorneys, we're the people you don't want to meet. So ideally, you don't want to see us at the end of a claim. Instead, you'd rather avoid that claim or that dispute or that adversary part of a claim altogether. And that's where I think looking at your defense counsel as a strategic partner, as a collaborative partner to help proactively take a look at something before it goes too far down the road, so you can help set up where are those tension points going to be, and can they help you look around the corner, look down the road around the corners to help manage and proactively prevent those litigated claims from occurring and those disputes from occurring to begin with. Similar to claims as injury prevention kind of a mindset, so can a defense attorney be a litigation prevention mindset.
Perfect, perfect. And Maggie, can you tell me how you determine when nurses are deployed into the process?
You know, one of the biggest challenges in the industry, to Kathy's point, is that we involve resources a little too late, right? Especially either defense counsel and or nurses. What we want to do ideally is be able to identify those claims that really have characteristics that have the potential for becoming your longer term, more aggressive claims that involve more complications, right? Unfortunately, we in our industry don't have really clean data. So to develop those metrics and those milestones and characteristics around when we engage a clinical resource is a little difficult. So what we try to do is establish a real early intervention program within our triage model. Even if a claim appears simple, we know that those simple ones can become quite expensive if they're not managed appropriately, right? And what we try to do is we try to collaborate very closely with our claims team to understand those triggers earlier rather than later, because waiting later is just going to become a much more expensive claim for us. We all know that we have programs that we've developed that really that are meant to address 20% of the claims that really drive your cost. So we create these big programs in that attempt to be able to manage that medical cost to the hope of catching that 20%, right? Involving your resources sooner rather than later is always an important approach to take. Just trying to mitigate as much as you can up front.
Thank you. And Kori, kind of talk a little bit about the role of the medical bill review provider in this process.
Yeah, I think the medical bill review world gets a little bit of a black eye, where we're kind of looked at like a bottom feeder when really we're dressed as a quarterback. I mean, we are sitting at the helm of where all the benchmarks and the trends are sitting, and coordinating between the defense or the nurse case management, the PPO, bringing that full story together is really critical. Maybe not in the current claim you're sitting in, but forecasting. Everybody loves to talk about predictive modeling, you know, just understanding what's driving a claim, whether it be the injury or the reimbursement, the provider's personality, the injured worker's personality, how they're intertwining together. So medical bill review, I think oftentimes is looked at, okay, it's already been through, it's at the end, I'm just going to get the bill processed, you're going to get me as many discounts as you possibly can. We've really tried to change that paradigm to say, no, include us, because we have a story to tell you. It's kind of hidden in the details, if you will.
Right, right.
Yeah, and if I could add to that I think Kori just hit it on the head in terms of not viewing it as a transaction, not viewing it as just a series of transactions, but workers' compensation is that story, and figuring out what is the narrative and what roles are different people playing. There's such an element of psychology in any workers' compensation claim, because you're dealing with a employment relationship at its very fundamental base, and that's a huge part of any person's life typically.
No story is the same, right? I mean, that's what, none of us got here on purpose, but none of us left by accident. So, you know, something drew us in. it's really that no story is the same. So taking a step back and broadening your perspective of that full continuum of care is really critical in managing a claim successfully.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Annie, when is the right time to start thinking about the Medicare issues in the claims process?
Absolutely. Right away. I think, as we were preparing for this and kind of talking about these narratives and these stories and everything that's going on in a case, you're going to tick off the Medicare boxes pretty quick. You're going to be looking at, is the person 65 years or older, or even 62 and a half or older? Those are quick key things that you need to hone in on. If you've got somebody who's on Medicare, it's probably going to drive getting a defense attorney on that file quicker. If it's a denied claim, you're really going to want to pay attention to your bill review process. You don't want any bills to slip through. If you've got a primary liability denial where you've paid no medical, you've paid no indemnity, you don't want to have a bill slip through. Your nurse case managers are going to be important, right? What's happening at those appointments, whether the appointment, the claim is denied or accepted, all of that stuff will play into what's going to need to happen down the line with Medicare. If you have somebody who's on Medicare right away, you have to start reporting that claim to Medicare right away if it's admitted. If you don't, you could be facing up to $1,000 per day per claim fine. So it's really important to kind of weave the Medicare inquiry throughout your claim, and particularly to identify those people who are on Medicare or who have a reasonable expectation of getting on Medicare, because that's going to drive really what goes into the claim. It's going to drive, what you need to talk about at mediation, settlement language, whether you need a Medicare set aside or not, whether you need to make sure Medicare gets paid back. So there's a lot of moving parts if somebody is on Medicare or has that reasonable expectation.
Thank you. And Kathy, when we think about understanding that overall story, what is the advice that you give your clients in involving you in their claims process and just kind of utilizing you as that strategic partner?
Well, I think the defense attorney can only tell the story they're given sometimes. And they can write some of the story as you go along. It may be developed through a deposition, through discovery, but at its fundamental heart, some of the facts are baked from the moment an injury happens. But even as that happens, getting the right information, getting the people involved when the memories are still fresh, where the information is still fresh, helping identify where perhaps it's a very complex claim through your experience of having litigated other claims to say, this is something actually we could do to prevent that from happening, getting the right managed care or case management on a complex claim early, like a TBI or some where there's so many moving parts, knowing that we need to collect certain information for an MSA, knowing that it's a Medicare involved claim, that may make a difference of what discovery you do. And then also having that relationship of trust and rapport with the employer, with the policyholder, and having empathy and compassion for the injured worker as you interact with them during all spaces. I mean, this is someone who is often in a stressful crisis situation. And I think if the longer you do it, sometimes it's easy to view it as a transaction, and you should always go back to that touchstone of humanity and sort of remind yourself, these are human beings at all junctions. The injured worker, the small business owner, they all have stressors. And we all know from the last year, those stressors were multiplied, and trying to be sensitive to that to help them get the information they need and educate them. Use your role as an opportunity to educate for not only this claim, but the next one.
And Anita, if you don't mind if I jump in, I love what both Kathy and Annie have said about getting in early, because these are both two areas of the product or areas of the claim where you don't typically deploy until later, but they've said critical things that happen in bill review that if it's not caught at the time of processing in a bill, it could change that Medicare set aside. It could change the defense attorney's strategy. So deploying them early and then intertwining your bill review into those strategies so that everybody is on the same line of thinking is really been kind of a shift in the way we look at the industry and how we're looking at a claim and how we're processing a claim. Because to Maggie's point, those big grand schemes we have on claims generally are too late. You know, by the time you could have done this work prior to, and now you're backtracking for little return on investment because you're just a little bit too late with certain things that have locked you in a claim.
And you know what too, Anita, to everybody's point here is, we leverage our nurse case managers as much as we can, but I don't think we as an industry take the time to really educate our nurse case managers, whether we're internal, whether we're in the field, whether we're vendors. We don't take the time to really invest in educating our clinical support on the process of claim management. If we take the time to really educate and help them understand, not that they need to be claim examiners because that's not their role, but if they understand the needs of the claim professional so that they can walk with them, beside them, as they get and manage these claims, it'll be a much more cohesive and integrated approach to managing the medical issues surrounding the claim. If we engage case managers later on or just ask them for certain information, they won't necessarily understand or have the depth and breadth of knowledge to help execute on what we're looking for from a claims perspective. And believe it or not, just training nurses on claims, they find it so fascinating because now they say, hey, now I know why I've been asked these questions all these years. Thank you for sharing that with me. It's information that they can use, and it gives them a perspective on the importance of their role in the overall claim management process.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And everybody understanding where they fit into the process. And I think we do
Exactly.
lose that in this industry, especially the way we deploy resources, because, a lot of times, well, I only want to pay this vendor when I absolutely need them, or I only want to include them in the process, when they can absolutely bring value. And sometimes we kind of miss the overall boat with that. The overall understanding of the claim, the overall understanding of the process, the overall understanding of all of the various relationships involved. Kori, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that coordination and communication are really critical. We've operated in silos for so long that, it's kind of finally seeing the breadth of how effective you can be when you coordinate, whether that be the same vendor or multiple vendors, different levels. I love when nurses are involved, quite frankly, because they are so detail oriented and injured workers feel comfortable telling them things, right? It's part of their role. So they bring an element to the table that is generally very early in the claim, and having that communicated across all lines. I think sometimes we sit in our boxes too much and think, well, I'm not, Maggie just said it, they don't need to be claims examiners, but the fact that they know that lingo, they know what to look for, they know how to intertwine, I think is really, really critical. And, as we were all talking and prepping, storytelling and communication came up again and again and again. And it was nice that we're all on the same page and could give this different perspective to our audience, because it has made a huge difference.
Definitely. Any other thoughts you want to add to that part of the conversation?
No, I think they covered it all. It's really all about that storytelling piece, and that's what we're doing in the end. So.
Thank you. So I want to switch gears a little bit, just for a minute, and kind of talk about the relationships between all of us. And, when you think about our audience today, it's new entrants into the market, and, maybe folks who have been in this market for a few years. And as they're thinking about their careers, what are some of the things, Kathy, that they can be thinking about in terms of the relationships and just how they build on their career in the workers' comp space?
Well, I think from the defense attorney perspective, one of the things that was most valuable to me over the years was viewing that client relationship as a relationship. Again, not as a transaction, not just as a claim, which sounds so cold and detached, again, siloed. And it's really important to get to know your client, get to know what's going on in their industry, get to know what's going on in their workplace. As a defense counsel, when you're first connecting with that policy holder, what's motivating the different parties involved here? Did the employee and employer have a good relationship? Are they going to have a good relationship as you try and bring that employee back to work? all those kind of dynamics that can impact a claim and how it's managed. And also then when it comes to care and case management, to be able to help inform the nurses if there's something going on, or to make sure they understand what kind of care is needed to get that person back to work, what kind of demands will be placed on someone in transitional duties, and just to understand the bigger picture so that you don't take sort of a blinders, this is my job and this is my lane. Well, if this needs to occur over here in that lane, who needs to get involved to make sure you tag out then to get someone involved who can address that silo or can address that lane? Just like silos in an employer, large employers, you've got benefits here, you've got payroll here, you've got work comp and disability management over here, but really the integration of all of them is the workplace and the employment relationship. And sometimes you need to have all the pieces talking to each other to get the best outcome and to manage the costs, to your point, Maggie, where people are concerned about costs, and same with you, Kori, with, well, you can't manage costs unless you're really taking a big picture view of that. And oftentimes the steps you take early on are what are going to save you the money on the back end as well and get the person back to work. And it's a win-win all around.
Exactly. And Maggie, how do the relationships for the nurses, how does that impact what they're doing on a daily basis?
You know, insofar as looking at a nurse's role, I think a lot of times, especially with new nurses that I bring into the industry, what I help them understand is that they have such a solid foundation around managing critical issues, right? They're nurses, they've come up some clinical experience, but they have all of the assessment, the initial investigation. They have all of the things that I would think would be critical elements for a career in the insurance industry. So that's the first thing I help them recognize. That's important for them to know. The other thing that's important for them to understand is the business side of the industry, right? We're nurses, but we work in a business now. We work in an insurance industry that is really here to provide effective, appropriate care within a cost-effective framework. So understanding the business side of the industry is also going to be a critical part as they grow their career. The other thing I say is, because you're a nurse, it makes you a much more critical part of the team, but it also allows you to create a diving board into other areas within the industry. Because you're a nurse doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be or want or necessarily have to be a nurse in the industry. I'm a nurse, but I've done a little bit of everything in my career, but it's because I've sought out the opportunities, learning the different parts of what we do. And it's clinical, yes, but a lot of it is business, a lot of it is negotiation, a lot of it is client interaction, client services. Heck of a lot of it is regulatory, right? We live in a very, very regulated world. Understanding all of the moving parts on regulation with bill review, what you can't do as case managers, what we can and can't do within the claim world. There is so much that anybody who would want to be in this industry can grow and continue to do in different spaces. It's about taking it one step at a time, understanding the business, and giving yourself the opportunity to explore and to take risk. That's the other thing, you know, sometimes we're very much comfortable with our space, and that's good, and that's great. But if you want to get out there and learn more, it's taking that risk and being able to say, hey, I want to do more. And that's great because there's a lot of opportunity there.
Definitely, definitely. Kori, switching gears a little bit again, can you talk to us for a minute about, you know, we have medical bill review programs that are repricing medical bills, right? What's the difference between that and, say, a premier medical bill review program?
It's a great question. It really comes down to how deep you're looking at a bill and, you know, again, bringing that claim mentality into the picture, taking the transactional perspective out of it and looking at the claim holistically, looking at the bills holistically. So, you know, repricing is great. PPO relationships are great. You know, you get strong discounts. You know, there's really good results, but taking it a step further to really look at the industry and what's being done correctly and what's being done right. And I don't say that just for the payer, right? We have a responsibility to take care of the injured workers. And right now we have a really good opportunity to make sure that they're getting the best care and really kind of redefine healthcare and workers' compensation, because it can get a little ugly. And, you know, we want to make sure we're constantly advocating for cost containment for employers so they can continue to do business. Also doing right by the injured worker so they're getting the right care, so they understand what's happening for them. And in a premier bill review setting, that happens. We're looking at the finite levels of a surgery, what medications were given, what was appropriate, what was inappropriate on a surgical bill, the length of physical therapy, anything that we can look at therapeutically from a clinical setting to make sure we're going down the right path. And working with folks like Maggie and her team to say what happened at the visit. So again, it's not just this silo kind of approach. And I love talking about medical bill review because it's the most unsuspecting part of workers' comp, where somebody would say like, hey, I'm really excited to be part of that. I mean, me personally, I came in for a temporary paycheck and I left that position with a career. Like, I did not see that coming, but there's so much data intertwined in there and so much of a story you can tell to do the right thing in healthcare. And I think bottom line, that is something we're working towards. And it's really, really exciting time to be in all these different facets of workers' comp because they all come back to that kind of main focal point.
Yeah, and I think in our prep session, we talked about the fact that, all of us kind of never expected to make workers' compensation a career, but, there are so many opportunities and there are so many different avenues that you can take, even beyond the ones we've talked about here today. But Annie, can you talk for a minute about some of the things that occur on the MSA side and maybe some of the ways that, different folks could be involved in that process?
Absolutely. The bill review piece is fascinating to hear about, Kori, and I like hearing about it because so much of what we're doing when we come to doing the Medicare set-asides is figuring out what that future care piece looks like. And when you look at what happens in the MSA world or working for a vendor, we employ a wide swath of folks. We have nurses, we have all of our nurses in-house. We have PharmDs, we have attorneys, and then we have like former claims adjusters that, do work out in the field. And, then we have folks who are specializing, I don't exactly know how they all found their way in, but they've become like our amended review guru. Like if somebody's, submitting a stale MSA that Medicare looked at, 5 years ago. So there's the opportunity to really specialize. And I think that's kind of what brought me in. I was in private practice in Minnesota at a mid-sized defense firm, and the managing shareholder at the time happened to be a mentor, and she sent me to a Medicare compliance thing. She was like, go get certified. And I was like, okay, like, what's this going to be like? And I fell in love, like, oddly enough, like Kori, you said, like, you just kind of find the thing to geek out on. And I think that that's really prevalent in being able to also specialize in such a specific part of Medicare compliance and how that plays into work comp claims. So I think, it's an area that's very, specialized, but also requires people from all across the board looking at these claims. And then when you look at more innovative products and things that are coming on the market, you have this industry looking at like evidence-based Medicare set-asides, right? So these are people who aren't going to be submitting to Medicare, but what can we do in like sort of that real world setting to take advantage of PBM pricing, PPO pricing that, you otherwise wouldn't get to do if you're just doing a traditional MSA. So that's where that bill review piece comes in. That's where nurses matter again. What happens, and defense attorneys, right? Like what's available under the treatment parameters of that jurisdiction? Can we limit their physical therapy? Can we limit, what is they're doing? Does it make sense? All of those pieces really come together when you're looking at allocating future care. And of course, you have MSAs, you have life care plans, you have other pieces that go into, setting aside money for future care. So a lot going on.
A lot.
Go ahead.
I don't think anyone has ever said, it was really interesting hearing you talk about medical bill review. So thank you for that plug, because maybe that'll draw some people into the medical bill review world.
I love it.
In listening to everybody talk, I hope with the audience that it resonates that we are each experts in our own world, but we have also spoken upon the different parts of workers' comp. So, whatever avenue you go down in finding your interest level in workers' comp, the most important thing, in my opinion, is intertwining yourself in all the facets of the industry so that you can learn and you become more of a powerhouse in the seat you sit in. So I thought that was really cool that everybody kept going down the different lines and talking about different products, because it's really important.
And you
Yeah,
can't be all things to all people. I mean, none of us can be experts in each other's worlds in addition to our own and really do a good job at it. And I think knowing where to go to for that information and how to leverage the different specialties and expertise that you need for the unique circumstances of a claim or an injury is really important. So if, for example, a situation is that you're in litigation and there's talks of settlement, how can you really do a fully informed risk assessment unless you know what those intervention interests with those medical bills that either remain unpaid or paid by a third party, what they're going to cost in the work comp system, depending on where you are. That bill review partner is a really important partner to inform an educated risk and settlement assessment. And similarly, if you're looking at a Medicare set aside, unless you consult with your Medicare resource, how do you know what the actual cost against the risks and exposures are going to be unless you partner with the appropriate resources through the system to do that? It's not just a straightforward assessment here. It is a highly regulated, highly technical space with a lot of moving parts, and that's why we need everyone around the table to make it effective.
That's right. Kathy, I wanted you to talk a little bit about your journey and kind of how you got to where you are and, what it's meant to you in the space.
Well, like everyone else, I didn't go to law school planning to be a work comp attorney. But I started in a smaller private practice firm, and as an associate with a relatively general practice firm, you did whatever came your way. And at the time, a year or so in, they needed someone to help the partner in the workers' compensation space. So that's how I was introduced to it. And I've, of course, had these aspirations of wanting to be a trial lawyer, and trial lawyers are great. I mean, I had, 10 to 12 jury trials along the way in a variety of civil litigation. But there's something great about that work comp space as you get into it and get the knowledge and expertise, and you're working with the same employers or same insurers over time and creating those relationships to help them manage the risk. And over time, that's where my relationships built in the 15 years of practice. And I liked it enough that I went in-house with one of my insurance company clients 15 years in, and was with them for 13 years before an opportunity came to apply for the chief legal officer position, and then mix that business world with the work comp world to bring both sides to the table and sort of come around full circle from where I entered law with a business undergrad degree. And so it shows, I think there's so many different ways you can take it in different directions throughout your career. If you think you want to change, there's so many ways to change it up and look at different opportunities in the industry that you're not static. So if you want to change, there's ways to do that. And I haven't looked back. I really have found it challenging and continue to find it challenging as we go forward.
Thank you. And Maggie, how about you? Want to talk a little bit about your journey?
Sure. As you all know, I'm a nurse by trade. Started off as an intensive care nurse and fell a lot of love with hands-on nursing, and then went to field case management and ended up doing a little bit of everything within the space, both on the vendor side and on the payer side. Everything from case management, utilization review, bill review, managing cost management programs across the board. Played in the regulatory space for a little bit, and did client services for quite a bit also. So as you can see, a lot of different things that I've done. So I've gone full circle and I'm back in case management again. And I think the reason why I've come back to case management is because I see the value that overall in the industry, the nurse's role plays. So it's my opportunity to be able to give back in my way, bring new people into the industry, teach people who are already in the industry what I've learned through my experiences. And I think just being able to share that gives me fulfillment in terms of growing my career and, going off into the sunset, but to everybody's point here and to Kathy's point, you continue to evolve and you continue to learn and do different things. We've talked a little bit about risk management, so I'm starting to jump into some of the risk management certifications because of my background and my knowledge. So, you know, it's never boring, and it definitely is always challenging, and you meet a lot of great people, and you're seeing a lot of new people coming in to the industry, which is awesome. So that's my story.
And Kori, you've already enlightened us about some of the fantastic things about bill review. You know, I have a passion there as well. But what are some of the things that might be underutilized by carriers or users of your service that you feel are, you know, have great value from bill review, but the customer doesn't necessarily always look at that?
I think it's data. I'm a huge data person, which is why I fell in love with bill review, but looking at the data purely from the bill review perspective. And, you know, bill review sounds so easy when you just, you know, talk about it. Oh, it's repricing a bill. There's so much strategy because every fee schedule is different. Every reimbursement rate can be different. That can be different based on region. So there's a lot of expertise that sits within the bill review world. You know, Anita, it is endless how many ways you can shift that data. And it's a little bit different perspective from the way a claims operation pulls their data. Neither one right or wrong over the other. They're just different, but they're complementary to one another. So I think the way we're starting to report out, or the way we can report on our data, you know, kind of sharing it with our clients in a different perspective is really intriguing and can be helpful to, you know, a claims adjuster or a TPA that's, you know, trying to differentiate and look at different trends. So I think sounds like a simple answer, but it is complex for sure. But I definitely think the data is where bill review can be utilized a little bit more. And I've said it a couple of times now, but communication, not just looking at bill review as a transactional vehicle, but a strategic partner to help navigate through a claim.
For sure.
You know, Kori, if I may, real quick point here, and I think you make a great point in terms of the data. I think where we in our industry need to look at more is leveraging the bill review data to identify how a claim matures, so that we can take that information and create more models around it. I think we in our industry rely more on our payer data, but bill review data is much, I'll call it cleaner.
Mm-hmm.
And much more transactional, but you guys capture really a lot of what we need in terms of being able to assess trending and how claims mature, because you can start off with a simple lumbar sprain and end up with a failed back. Right. And if we're able to create triggers within a bill review environment that says, hey, you guys are heading toward this path, maybe it's an opportunity to look at it a little closer, or intervene if you can, or try different approaches to try to mitigate. But I think the bill review data is definitely a big part that we're not leveraging as aggressively as we possibly could.
It's unbiased, you know, if I can say that, right? It's just, that's where I would say
data.
It's purely transactional, where the claims has more of, you know, the emotional, different temperament. There's a lot more in there. To your point, it's cleaner. You know, and the one thing we haven't talked about that really sets a medical bill review is the presence of fraud. And, you know, in bad billing, bad practices in billing, on not even completed procedures. So looking at that bill review data from a perspective of, you know, different providers and what we're seeing each of them do, because in an individual client's world, you only see what you see. When you have medical bill review from somebody who does work nationally or even regionally, you know, depending where you're at, you can see trends across a larger book, which is going to tell you an even bigger story that's probably going to lend to different strategies for your group. So, you know, data is where it's at in 2021 for me.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Annie, you guys get to look at data a lot because you are entering the process at a point where you're trying to figure out what the future payments look like. But do you always get the data that you need to be able to do your piece?
That's a good question. Not always. I think, you know, a big part of doing Medicare set-asides, you need at least the most recent 2 years of medical and 2 years of pharmacy. And then we want to see that pay history at a minimum to see what you've been paying, right? So we're seeing kind of the bill review piece filtered through the payments made out on the claim. So we're able to kind of put those three things together to get an idea of what traditional Medicare would do with that claim. And those are all things that Medicare asks for in their work comp MSA reference guide. Because it's not a statutory creation, you know, we don't have Congress saying Medicare set-asides should exist. We have Congress saying that about, you know, the reporting I talked about. We have Medicare saying that about conditional payments, like making sure Medicare gets paid back. When it comes to the Medicare set-aside realm, we're really at the mercy of an agency that's just acting within its own discretion. There's no appeal process. And so what happens on the claim and those interventions along the way and what gets paid matters. Because when it comes down to kind of the very end with some of these procedures and some of the things that happen to folks, Medicare will request the actual bills for certain DME or surgical procedures. That's what Medicare is going to go on. So it really matters, you know, what sort of intervention you have along the way so that we can hopefully mitigate some of that stuff out by not having to rely on that bill, or hopefully that bill was mitigated, right? And you paid, you know, the amount you should have paid. That's the kind of stuff that we're looking at and we're thinking about. And certainly if somebody's on brand drugs, we want to kind of know why. Can we get them on a generic? What are those pieces? But you're so far down the line that kind of undoing some of that can be really challenging if you weren't thinking about this at the outset. And I think one of the other places that I really see an impact too is on those completely denied claims. You heard me talk about them. They're so important. You want to maintain that denial. If you do that, you have access to zero set aside. You don't need to set aside money, but it's really important that you don't make a medical payment or an indemnity payment. Those become so critical, and trying to get those refunded, because that will be one of the things I say, right? It's like, I'm like, oh gosh, look, you know, you made this payment, you made it a year ago. Can you go back to that provider and get it refunded? You know, what are your options in terms of kind of getting yourself out of that situation? And that's a challenging place to be, because you're, you know, typically you've already mediated, or you're on your way to a mediation. You're waiting for my report so that you can get to a mediation and settle your claim. So there's a lot of mitigation that we point out at the back end when we're writing the reports to say, hey, look, these are some things you should think about. If you don't need to settle tomorrow or next week, maybe you can reach a tentative settlement, and the employee and their attorney will go back and talk to the provider and move on to those, you know, generics, or change the dosing, right? So we have PharmDs who can look at this and say, well, if you package this drug this one way, it's crazy expensive, but if you package it this other way that's totally fine, you get these crazy cost savings. So there's tweaks like that we can see by looking at the data, essentially, looking at what's been paid for, what's going to be needed.
You know what's really interesting, Annie? I'm sitting here listening to you talk and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you know when people really care about bill review is in a post-settlement, in an annuity, because now everything's being watched by Medicare, and in order to cover any expenditures outside of that annuity, you know, medical bills are looked at, pharmacies looked at. So it's funny because it's really backwards. You know, at that point, I mean, it helps in the time, but it's a little bit too late. So I just wanted to point that out to the audience, because as I'm sitting here, I'm like, wow, we really have this a little bit backwards.
Well, and it's so important we learn from each claim too, that just because we couldn't reverse, you know, or make a different decision on this situation, to try and apply that lesson to the next one. You know, if we had learned from our nurse case manager that, oh, if only this hadn't been done here, we would have had this as an option, you know, file that away and educate those in the process to know if we can preserve this as an option here, here's our decision tree when we get to that point that we lost on this situation. So I think we have lessons to learn from each other that we can apply to improve the next transaction, the next, you know, injury, or prevent that next injury or tension point from happening altogether.
Roundtables. We need more roundtables. I think it's a practice that gets a little bit lost, but
Yeah.
clearly on this group has proven why that would be successful.
So our time has really gone by quickly, and I want to make sure that each one of you has the opportunity to give some final thoughts on our topic and on the claims management model. So Maggie, why don't we start with you?
As it relates to the use of clinical expertise, make sure you're consciously engaging your nurses sooner rather than later. It's worthwhile, even if you're outsourcing the services, to invest in that. The other thing is, even if you do have internal or external vendors that you utilize, take the time to teach them the claim model, help them understand the value of what they're bringing to you in terms of clinical knowledge that will help you as claim examiners mitigate and manage your claims. It's a great investment. They will appreciate it and they will get you what you need, but they need to understand what the ask is. And from a nursing perspective, I'm a nurse who is newer, who has aspirations to do other things, learn the business. There is a lot of knowledge out there around just the business. You've heard all the ladies here with all their great expertise. You can do that also if that's what you choose to do, but there is opportunity there. I've been in this now for about 30 years now. I've never gone back. I love the industry. There's a lot of things for you to do.
Perfect, thank you. Kathleen?
Should I just say ditto? Maggie said it so well. But I think that whole theme of being a proactive partner, a strategic partner, as a defense attorney, to not, if you're getting a claim either in-house or externally, to not view it narrowly, but view it as an opportunity to educate. If you're seeing some opportunities perhaps that was missed, to use that to educate for the next claim, and to invite yourself to the table before claims happen as an injury prevention partner with a policyholder or an employer, or as someone to educate in terms of the system as a whole and the different ways to leverage these different resources in the claims world when you're partnering with a claims representative. There's a lot of opportunities to be that strategic partner, which it makes it a lot more fulfilling for the defense attorney as well, to be that risk management lens in the bigger picture.
Perfect, thank you. Kori?
From a service standpoint, I would say challenge your bill review vendors. They've got a lot of power at their fingertips as far as data is concerned, and challenge them to see things differently than you do and find a way to bring that all back to center for that claim, and really ask the hard questions. It's doable. Everybody's capable of it, and you just have to find the partner that can do it well for your group. From in an industry perspective, collaboration. I think I've said it in every frame I've been in so far, in communication, but never say never in this industry as far as looking at your careers and opportunities, because you never truly know what lies in that service. We haven't even touched on it today, but with medical bill review, we're lobbying in different states. We're trying to change fee schedules. We're trying to influence and impact. And that's not something, if you asked anybody's opinion in the industry, that you would probably really know unless you were intimately aware. I think I coined Kathy as one of my new best friends, because I'm constantly trying to find ways to connect with defense attorneys to ask about strategies that I can do in bill review to help the claim or to mitigate risk. So there's a lot, under the rocks. So never say never, never turn down an opportunity. And like Maggie and Annie and Kathy and Anita have all said, just push the envelope, learn as much as you possibly can, because education in this industry is certainly power.
Absolutely. And Annie?
Yeah, to kind of jump off of what Kori was just saying. So part of my title is, being a policy strategist, and part of that is lobbying. So I go to Washington, D.C. I've done work on the PAID Act, which was just passed in December. So for those of you who do that Section 111 reporting, you're going to start getting information in December about any Medicare Advantage plan that the claimant might be on for the last 3 years. So that's super useful. I was a poli-sci major in my undergrad, and so that has always been something I care about, is what's going on in Congress and state houses. And so absolutely pay attention, and you can find those ways into the areas that you really care about within the industry. I would say also network. When you head out to conferences again, right, in person, if I'm there, come say hi, let's chat. And I think that goes for everyone on this call. I find the most interesting connections when I sit at a table where I know no one, right? And I just strike up a conversation. And then I start to see other areas of impact and where I can maybe help influence, right, with those risk management decisions. Factoring into those risk management decisions, I think also use your resources. So I say that, you know, with really good intentions, because I don't get paid hourly anymore, right? And for any of these vendors, they're getting your services, right? They want to provide customer service. And I can tell you, any MSA vendor has folks like me. There are attorneys there. You can call me ahead of time. I'll brainstorm about your case. I'll get on a call. I may have lost my headphone, but I'll do all of those things and really help you plan for what to do with your case, because I'm happy to do it. And there's no charge for that. You know, I'm not charging you for that. I'm happy to tell you, and I'll tell you when you don't need an MSA. I'm super happy to do that. I don't work in sales. So, you know, you just say, you know, you don't need an MSA on this one. Contract draft your way into what you want to do. Here's some language to think about. Use all of us that aren't charging you hourly, right? For free advice. That's what we're here for.
Thank you. That was great. And, you know, we didn't talk as much about the networking today, but really, I mean, that is such a critical piece of being successful in this industry and, you know, developing a career in this industry. And the Alliance of Women in Workers' Comp is a great place to start your networking. You know, there are so many open, welcoming, wonderful women that want to be a resource to you. And, you know, don't hesitate to reach out to anyone that you meet at an Alliance event or any of us. You know, we're all in this together. And, you know, the more we collaborate together, the better we'll all be. And, you know, you've heard each of these women today talk about, you know, their willingness to collaborate and their willingness to work with each other, and that collaboration makes the overall claims management process better in the end. So don't hesitate to reach out to us, anybody who's listening. And I do want to take a minute to thank Maggie. She has been a former Alliance of Women in Workers' Compensation board member. So thank you for that, Maggie. And I'd also like to thank Kathy. Kathy has worked with our ambassadors and helped to put on programs in the local market. So thank you to everyone.
Thank you.
Absolutely, who has been involved in the Alliance and making the Alliance the successful organization that it is. And ladies, I'd like to thank each one of you again for agreeing to be on the panel. You were fantastic, and we appreciate your contributions to the Alliance and to the workers' compensation industry as a whole. So thank you, everyone.